In this video, I want to show how I retrieve vulnerability titles when they're not natively included in the vulnerability detection data via API. The best you get is a QID, but at least this is something we can work with. The easiest way I have found to obtain the vulnerability title information is to pull the entire Qualys Knowledge Base and then make a custom column in the vulnerability table that does a QID lookup to the Qualys Knowledge Base and return the vulnerability title. So if you get value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any video ideas or questions about how to do something with Qualys, either with Power BI or in the native UI, post that in the comment below. Now let's get started. So what I have displayed here is both the top 10 vulnerabilities list that I created and the top 10 vuln list that you would find in the Qualys UI. And you can see mine is very similar to what you would get from Qualys. So how did I make this? Vulnerability titles are not available via API, either in the vuln data or the asset data that you pull for your assets. So the method I use to get the vulnerability title is to simply download the entire Qualys knowledge base to have it as a reference. Not only do you get the vulnerability title, but you get other useful data that can be referenced as well, such as the vulnerability category, the associated CVEs, if a vuln is patchable or it has a PCI flag, the associated software list, threat intelligence data, and other stuff. So let's begin with connecting to Qualys and pulling the knowledge base. I'll be connecting to the API URL here. Now, since it's a large KB, it might take quite a bit of time for it to actually pull it. It looks like it's sitting there doing nothing, but I can show you here that it's actually running. It just started, and it'll just take some time for it to present us some data. And so while we're waiting for this, you can see by refreshing that API processes page in the Qualys UI, there's been a number of queries going on that run and then they finish and then a new one starts again and they finish. And it all has to do with this initial connection here. And now we finally have our data. And we can go to transform the data. Okay, we're going to go ahead and expand vuln list. And we're going to expand vuln. And here we have all our columns. I'll click OK. And now we just need to rename this so it's not just response as a query, but we can rename it to something like Qualys KB full. There we go. And then we're going to go ahead and close and apply. Okay, and now we can go to our table and look at KB full. And look at that. We have all of our data. QID, vulnerability title. This is what everybody's used to seeing, but we're not getting that from the vuln data being pulled down, right? If we look at the vuln data, we're seeing pretty much everything but the vulnerability title. So having that full KB will be very beneficial. So what do we do next? Well, currently what I'm doing to be able to achieve this right here is to create a reference column back to that Qualys KB. So I'm going to go ahead and go here to the vulnerability data that I have and say new column. And I'm going to call it Vuln Title. And we're going to do a related to Qualys KB full. And we're going to pick the title column. And that's it. So it is doing a related. And it's doing that because it's established a relationship of KB full using the QID. So it did that automatically. And so now we're able to add a column into our vulnerability data. So whenever we refresh this data, this column will remain. and that information will be updated. Okay, let's go ahead and create our top 10 vulnerabilities table. We're going to go ahead and make it match very closely to what we have here before in our other example. And we're going to add 2 columns, and they're both going to be the vulnerability title that we created just now with that custom column. So we got 1, we got 2. The second one, we're going to change it to be by count. There we go. We got the vulnerability titles here and the count of those titles here. Next, we want to go ahead and change that first vulnerability title. Under the filters, we're going to change it from basic filtering to top end, put a 10. And the value, we're going to use vulnerability title again and change it to count. And apply that filter, and there we go. All right, so here we have our top 10, although you'll see that there is more than 10 in the row. But that's something we adjust with a filter. We're going to drag over the status column into a filter, and we're going to enable active and new. And that way we're only seeing active and new vulnerabilities in this top 10 list. And after that, everything is just visual adjustments. And there we have our table. And that's the end of this video. I hope it was useful, and stay tuned for more videos to come. Cheers, everybody.